Welcome back. In this video, we're going to set up our project, our Hangman project, as well as create the user interface for it. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new 3D project. And here I'm going to name this Hangman, and then let's create it. And once Unity is loaded, let's go ahead and set up the UI properly. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to rename my sample scene. So I want this scene to be called Game Scene. Okay, so let's rename it Game Scene, and then let's reload this scene from here as well. So now we have this game scene, and inside of it I want to create UI. So I right click and create the user interface. The first thing that I'm going to use is going to be an image. So I want to have an image as the background. Now the thing is, in order for it to look the same for all of us, you should select QHD here, 2560 times 1440. And then the values should pretty much be the same. So let's click on this image and change the rect transform here. So the image should not be in the center, in the middle, but it should be stretched. So here you see on the right hand side in the column stretch, you can select whether you want to stretch, for example, towards the right, whether you want to stretch the top to the right, and so forth. I want to stretch to both sides. So here at the bottom right, you will find the stretch that I want to use here. This will then stretch the image accordingly. Now, the left position will be 0, the top position will be 0, the right position will be 0, and the bottom position will be 0. What that will do is it will create this background or this image that will basically span across the entire screen. Now, let's go over to our canvas. And in the canvas component, you can select render modes. So the one that we use by default is screen space overlay. The one that I want to use is going to be screen space camera. Here, if you want to use that, you need to define a render camera. In my case, I'm going to use the main camera for that. So let me drag that in there. And this will allow me to just have a different render mode for my UI. Because we're basically building a UI based game, not really working with a player object or graphics or anything like that. We're going to mainly really work with UI elements. So here, the render camera, set it to main camera. And by the way, if I am using anything that you don't fully understand, or if you're wondering what the exact things do, the exact properties here do, you can just click on this question mark here. Then the references in the manual will open up. So what you can see here is that we are now in the Unity manual for the version that we are using, and we can see all of the details here. So the different options that we have for the render mode: overlay, screen space camera, world space. And if you scroll down a little bit, you will see the difference between them. So here, for example, in screen space overlay, in this mode, the canvas is scaled to fit the screen and then rendered directly without reference to the scene or a camera. In the screen space camera, which is the one that we're using, in this mode the canvas is rendered as if it were drawn on a plane object some distance in front of a given camera. The on-screen size of the UI does not vary with the distance, since it is always rescaled to fit exactly within the camera frustum. So now you see frustum is a keyword that you usually don't use, so just open that up and check out what a frustum is. The size of the frustum at the given distance from the camera. A cross-section of the view frustum at a certain distance from the camera defines a rectangle in world space that frames the visible area. So if you scroll down a bit, you see that world space, for example, renders the UI as if it were a plane object in the scene. In our case, if it was a plane object some distance in front of a given camera. So in our case, the given camera is our main camera. So what we're basically doing is we're putting the canvas to be just in front of our main camera, because, well, we're defining our render camera to be the main camera. Okay, so if you look over here, basically this will be our canvas here with our background, in this case, the image. Now inside of this, I would like to have a text. Okay, I would like to display a text. So let's go ahead and create a new UI object, and it will be text this time. I'm going to call this one word to find, because that's going to be the word that we want to find. And you can see it's pretty small. So let's change its size up. So the font size should be something like 100, for example. And at the same time, let's make sure that we set the width to 2000, so it will be pretty wide. And at the same time, the height to 150. So now you can see the text is pretty readable, I'd say. Now, of course, I would like this to be centered, so horizontally as well as vertically aligned towards the center. So if you scroll down in the text component, you will find the paragraph alignment, and here I want to use the centered version for both of them. So now the text will pretty much be in the middle of my screen, and for now it will say new text, but of course I want to change that, and I'm going to write a placeholder here because it will just say something like word to find, and later we're going to replace that, of course, with the word that we use in an array, and we're going to see what arrays are. So basically with the word that we want to use via code here. And now I would also like to change the position of the word to find. So this position Y, basically I want to move it down. So moving items or changing integers inside of Unity is something that you can either do by scrolling or dragging. You can see here I can now drag this item around. So this is one way to do it, and you can see the Unity, the mouse, it starts back at the position of the left hand side. So it's like Snake 2, where you would move from one side directly to the other side, basically looping through the screen, even if you have multiple screens as I do. So that's how you could move the position, but of course it's a lot easier to just enter a value if you don't want to do it by hand. So sometimes it's good enough, because sometimes you just want to see roughly like how things will look if you position them or reposition them a little bit without having to enter the value. But most of the times it's best to just enter the value directly. Okay, now what I would like to have is, I would like to have another text. So here, let me duplicate this word to find. You can either use Control D or Control C and V, or Command C and V, depending on which system you're using. So here I'm going to change this to win text. And now the win text should have a different position. So the Y position should be at 0, but the X position I'm going to set to -750. So towards the left. And I'm also going to change the width and height of it. So I'm going to change the width to 300 and height to 500, like so. Okay, so it should not say word to find. It should say something like you win. Okay. And also, of course, the text should be centered as you see here. So now we have this you win text. And if you want it to be nicely aligned, make sure that you don't have empty spaces anywhere. So now we have this you win text, and I would like to have the same for a you lose text. So let's duplicate this one as well. And I'm going to call this one lose text, like so. And it should say something like you lose. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to deactivate both of them. You can see here, you can untick them. So use this checkbox to uncheck it, and then the item will be gray in the hierarchy on the left hand side. So instead of being white, it will be gray now, which basically means that it's deactivated in the current view. It's not visible. So what we're going to do is, if we win, we're going to activate the win text. If we lose, we're going to activate the lose text. So these are different ways how you can handle this. In the last chapter, you saw how we actively changed the text that was displayed. So we changed the text property of a given text item in our user interface. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to prepare the different items straight away and activate them or deactivate them. Okay, so this is just a different approach to achieve the same thing, more or less, because in the end, they both will just display a way of, well, saying whether you won or lost. And now I would like to duplicate this once again, and I'm going to call this one time text. And this time text should display the time. So for now, the text should just say something like time. And let me activate it so that I actually see where it is. And I would like to change its position and set its position to -300 at this point. So here will be the timer. It will run. And let me change its height to 120 instead. It doesn't have to be as big because then they will overlap potentially. So you can see the time has a height of 120, the width of 30, and position of 750 minus, and same for the Y position, -300. All right. And that's it for this video. Always make sure to save your scene after you have made these changes, because otherwise everything will be lost. So don't forget that, and see you in the next video.